If we don't know what happened in the past, there's a very good chance that it could happen again in the future. At one time, our country had a system that separated black Americans from white Americans, just like these tracks. It was a system that was accepted until some brave individuals put their lives on the line to change it. Here in Flagler County, these same tracks did the same thing. We're going to go back in time through the memories of these individuals who lived before, during, and after the change. Listen to their stories. America, the land of the free and home of the brave, was a wonderful place to live, work, start a family, unless you were a Negro. You would probably belong to a white owner as a slave. This legally changed with the passage of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment stated that blacks would now be protected legally, just as their white owners. And the 15th Amendment prevented a citizen from being denied the right to vote because of race, color, or previous status as slaves. But it did not quite work out that way. The law was clear, but the actions of men were another matter. In the South, state laws were created to separate white and blacks, which made the Negro a second-class citizen. These came to be called Jim Crow laws after a stereotype of the black minstrel show before the Civil War. These laws lasted until the 1960s. Life in the segregated South many times, there was a geographical separation, like the train tracks through a town.
And it was great out in the country, but when we moved to town, it wasn't so great. It was dangerous. You weren't allowed uptown at night. The look they gave you, but that was enough. We knew what was going on.
I can remember one day at my father's service station, my job was when the car came in, way back then we used to clean your windshield, and I had a whisk broom and I'd sweep out the car, and my dad would put the gas in. And this black man came in and he had a brand new Cadillac. And I did what I did to anybody, didn't think anything of it. And as the man left, my father said, "I wonder who he thinks he is." That night I asked my mom, now I'm like 12 years old, and I said, "What did Daddy mean about that?" She said, "Well, your dad's your dad. He just doesn't like black people." But later on, with a little bit more education, I think what he meant was he had always been taught that he was superior to the black.
As a child, it was something that you learned to accept. But I will say this, it did not cloud my judgment as to how to judge people.
That time kind of was passed down. You know, you just know where, you know your place. You know where you're supposed to be and where you're not supposed to be at certain times. So my dad was the barber in the South Side. So I grew up, so I knew a lot of people. A majority of the people came to my dad for a haircut.
Miss Sarah Griot, she's deceased now. She was our black beautician. She owned her own business on US 1. And then Mr. Jones, who's my neighbor now, he does barbering also.
The best business that I knew really was in Burnell was Branham. And why I say that, because when we didn't have money, he allowed my mother to come in and get whatever she needed for us being a singer, parent and everything.
I can remember visiting people. We had our own section, you know, and every night they met. A lot of times you had to go in the side through the emergency room. I mean, it was a written rule to go in the front. You know, they had a television, nice sitting area, but a lot of time we went through the back and went to our section of the wing where most of the black patients were.
When Dr. Canacris came to town in the late 40s, my mother was his first nurse. When you went into his office, there were two waiting rooms. There was a white waiting room and there was a black waiting room.
Dr. Canacris brought Dr. Carter, our first black doctor. Canacris brought him in to this county. Dr. Canacris brought our first black nurses here. A lady from St. Augustine was our first LPN that he hired.
They seemed to see most of the black patients, and they were pretty good.
Flagler Beach, please. If you got caught in Flagler Beach after 6:30, they put you in jail. The only time I ever, when I was in high school and college, that I went to Flagler Beach was I got hired to help this lady clean this little beach cottage. Other than that, that's the only reason they felt that blacks had any business on the beach was to clean houses and hotels.
We hung out at the beach a lot, but it wasn't at Flagler Beach. It was a place called Cobb's Corner. That's a little north of Flagler Beach, and that's where we all hung out at. We never, very seldom did we ever go through Flagler Beach to get to Cobb's Corner.
The church was the most positive influence in the community beside the parents, because you had pastors back there of the church that really cared. They talked to the young people when they would pass them in the street, or they'd be walking by the house, they'd call them and talk to them and everything. Because just like I said, back there, our minds were running 100 miles an hour, and you needed somebody to kind of keep your mind in check.
Generally, the churches in general, and I mean in most communities, and it's pretty much the hub of the community. You know, you seek to educate the community on, you know, different social issues of the time. You provide support for church members as well as for the community, and always the spiritual guidance that pastors and their congregations and their deacons and their ministers always try to provide for the community that they're in and also their congregation.
It was historically the same for all the districts, that the black schools did not receive the same funding, the same materials, the same anything.
We had books, but they were secondhand books. They were used, some of them was real in terrible shape.
I know for a fact, my mom was a custodian at Carver High School. So a lot of time when stuff would come in, like books from the high school, they were secondary books that had been used. And pages was torn out of them, not up to par, but I know they weren't new books.
The children didn't have anything. They didn't have window coverings on the windows and the sun beat in on them. They didn't have Xerox paper. They had nothing.
The teachers then could make us excel even with those inferior books because they were behind.
The first break in the separate but equal mindset was 1948, when President Truman signed Executive Order 9981, eliminating segregation in the military, and in 1954, the Supreme Court rules on the landmark case Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, stating that segregation in public schools is unconstitutional. Things were changing. 1 year later, Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat to a white passenger in Montgomery, starting a bus boycott. The buses are desegregated the next year. In 1962, James Meredith became the first black student to enroll at the University of Mississippi. Violence and riots surrounding the incident caused President Kennedy to send 5,000 federal troops. About 200,000 people joined the March on Washington at the Lincoln Memorial, where Dr. Martin Luther King delivers his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And President Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the greatest civil rights legislation since Reconstruction. Then in 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. King is assassinated by racist James Earl Ray. In 1971, the Supreme Court upholds busing students to promote integration of the schools.
Desegregation is an institutional system whereby an apartheid system where a legal separation of the races is illegal. Integration, in my opinion, is a voluntary act among individuals to meet and to mingle.
One of the ways that some of the districts was trying to get around integration, they devised what is referred to as freedom of choice.
From what I gather, you had a choice. It was supposed to be integrated, but they sent a form down. If you wanted to send your kids to Burnell High School, you could. Even though we were supposed to have integration, I think that's how it started. And I remember my sister went the first year, and we didn't go. We decided not to.
We had parents bring their children to school that normally would have ridden a bus, brought them to school with guns, stood out in the parking lot and stood there as sentries watching their child get into class because they were so sure that there was going to be a riot or that they were going to be harmed or that a black student might brush up against them.
They were there to either shoot us because they did not want us at Burnell High School.
My grandparents and my mother were very educated people. They ensured us that when you came to school, we needed the school in order to move to the next level. So they instilled in us at a very early age that we may be called names, but we didn't have to act like what we were being called. And you didn't have to be a product of your environment. And we kind of teamed together, and again, I contribute that to Flagler County having some of the better teachers at the time, Mr. Ralph Miller. Again, you hear me name Dr. Carter and Buddy Taylor. Those people ensured that if you went to them and you had a problem, especially a racial problem, we were able to overcome that. But my parents were very instrumental in ensuring that we didn't behave in a negative way to bring negative attention to ourselves.
When I first went to Burnett High School, it was just written rule. Our parents sat us down and told us, you don't do this, you don't do it. We don't go to the bathroom. We never went to the bathroom alone. I went to the bathroom alone once, and I got in a fight. You know, these guys surrounded me, and I had to fight my way out of the bathroom. But that was the rule that they told me, and when I got home, I got a beating for it. I mean, because I thought I got in a fight, and where were you in the bathroom? Who was with you? And I said I went by myself, you know. So I got in the fight. But they had told me you never go to the bathroom alone. You make sure you got somebody else black with you to go to the bathroom. But at that time, it wasn't that many blacks at the school.
One memory that I have was a young lady that I felt very close to, and she was a Caucasian. When I went off to college, I was in Cocoa. She and I would talk for hours on the phone when we were here. And my daddy, I can remember my daddy saying, I don't know what in the world you and Lana have to talk about that much over the phone, because we weren't, we couldn't do all of our talking during school because I didn't want her being ostracized. So we talked a lot on the phone. And I remember when I went off to college, we were talking, and I said, why don't you come down one weekend and visit? And it was so blatant. I remember her parents saying, I know you and Lina are very close, but if I allow her to come down and visit you and the people in Burnell find out, then she will have problems.
And then I made some friends, and some of the friends that I made, we're still friends today. But it was tough, We run into a lot of prejudice. You would be called names, and you know what name you would be called if you were seen with a black. I don't want to say that, but it was the end lover. If you were considered hanging out or talking with some of the blacks. So that was one of the reasons I think that held kids back is they didn't want that stigma or that name tagged to them as being an end lover.
Actually, I made real good friends with some of the white teachers because we were working together and we would exchange students if a student would give me problems. At that time, we could do that. And if I had a student, that student was giving me a problem, I would give it to that other teacher because it was one black and one white in the department where I was.
They were pretty much, they were middle school students that I started with. And if there was anything that would display prejudices, I didn't see it. And like I say, with my background and the age that I am, I would have been able to pick that up. But I did not see it. It may have been there. I can't say it wasn't there, but they were respectful enough for me not to see it.
I understood it was either a chemical-based fire, either in a custodial area in the bottom or possibly a chemistry room, but it was in the bottom floor and the high school building was 3 stories high. So when that burned, that took that main building down, but it did leave the wings, which are presently at Bunnell Elementary. There was 2 wings that were made out of brick. They're still there. And of course the old gym.
After 50 years of educating students, Bunnell High School was severely damaged by a fire on Saturday morning, June 27, 1970. It is not known what caused the fire. Students who attended Bunnell High School then moved into George Washington Carver High School, and its name was changed to Bunnell High School. After several years, Flagler Palm Coast High School was built, and students moved into the new school. Bunnell High School then closed its doors.
And then when Bunnell High School burned down, I don't know if you heard about the fire, all the kids had to come to Carver. And then they changed it from Carver High School to Bunnell High School. We couldn't even keep our name.
Till they finished building Flagler Palm Coast High School. And I think they moved here. And ITT donated the land to build the high school, and it was completed, I believe, in 1975. Because I came here in 77, it was already a couple of years old.
Segregation still exists a half century after the Civil Rights Movement, from the Ku Klux Klan still being in existence to people still being judged by the color of their skin. Learning to live with each other has been at times a challenge. Laws cannot change hearts or cure prejudice.
I arrived here in 1993, and working overseas in warm climate, I wanted to live on the coast. So I drove up the coast and got to Flagler Beach, and there were no people, and it was beautiful. And I thought, oh, Dorothy, you're home. And I hear there's a market, and I go to the market, and I'm walking around, and I noticed that I don't see any African American people. So I stopped one of the farmers. I said, excuse me, I don't see any black folks here. And he looked at me and he said, y'all know where you are? We're proud here. We were the last to integrate. And do you know about the sign on the bridge? I said, no. And he said, yes, and it said no N-word after 8. I thought, oh my God, where did I move?
We still have it. It's alive and well. Having worked in the Flagler County School since almost 30 years, believe me, I've seen it. I would, not so much for me, but I witnessed other people and what they've had to go through.
But if it's so ingrained and so long in, in being exposed to their upbringing is sometimes difficult to get them to see that there are some differences in the world, I guess.
You have some that's in denial. I wouldn't say all of them,
Well, it's better today, but it'll never be no too much change in Flagler County. Long as it's an old generation right here, they still got a lot of devil in there.
Some people in school, people I talk to in schools, some people aren't racist. Some people I don't know probably are, but I don't really know.
Our lives in the county still remained fairly segregated, right after integration and as the years flowed from that. Nothing much changed in the county except the schools became of mixed color.
county itself is still greatly segregated because the third, fourth, and fifth generation African Americans still refuse to move in certain areas of Flagler County.
You have some people that are just diehard, that will not change. And the only thing you could do for those type of people is to avoid them, ignore them, or pray for them.
I think children accept other children, and students are more open-minded than they ever were before. And sometimes you'll walk in the cafeteria and you will see your black students sitting together and see your white students sitting together, but I don't think it's to the extent that, I definitely was not the extent that it was in the 50s.
But today, I mean, you can't tell the difference. Because, I mean, I don't care where you go. It's going to be a mixture there. And not just two or three. It's just a different time.
I think that today kids are more open-minded, and I don't even think they really think about what color somebody's skin is for the most part.
I would simply say that it is 100% better. Spiritually, I can say that simply because I can pick up any iPod or music device in school and it's all got the exact same music on it.
You have to get an education. And although you get an education, let me tell you something, just because you get an education because you're black, you know, some places doesn't mean a whole lot of it because you got to work 3 times as hard as the next person.
Finding a way to make everything happen for you. Go to work, get your education. Be sure you get your education because that's what's going to take you through.
The lack of education or the fact that they're not getting the things that they need in the schools is probably the biggest thing.
I think education was pushed a lot harder during my time than I think today. I think we took advantage of it. Opposed to what I see kids today of being in school and not taking advantage of it. We took advantage of it because that was our only way out.
We have young people in this county that have it in them to go on and make this world the world it should be. And we cannot hold them down. We need to give them every opportunity possible for them to grow up and become those young people.
Men like to cluster around with men. We do this at the barbecues. Women like to cluster with women. Go into schools and you'll see the African American students cluster at the same cafeteria table with their friends. Whites cluster with their friends. We have, I think, as human beings, even nationally, go out, travel overseas, you meet someone from the United States, we tend to cluster. That clustering drive is within us naturally. Then I think there will always be a necessity for a group like the Commission on Civil Rights to keep prodding the discussion for whoever the dominant group with power to ensure that we are running the system so that it's fair.
I've seen a lot of changes, and I'm looking forward to a lot more. As this kind of continues to grow, I've seen some changes.
We still have a long way to go. We're at the top of the hill, but we haven't gotten there yet. When and that's the same thing got to happen in Burnett. We got to forget about personal agendas. If we're going to live together and grow together, fight together, love together, and eat together and all like that, we're going to have to realize that we're all human. We're all of the same blood.
That all people are not bad, that there's always something good to be found in a person, no matter where they're from, what they look like, what sex they are, what their orientation is, what language they speak, and always look for good in people.
We just got to treat one another with honor and respect. If we do that, we'll find out that this little community that we live in can do great things.
To be successful and to head this country, this world, and to the way that it's supposed to go, we're all going to have to come together, different races, creed, religious, whatever, and work toward one common goal.
I just pray that people will come to the realization that heaven does not have a black section and a white section. Heaven has a place, and it's there for all of us.
The stories that you have heard are in the past, and they focused on things that divide us, like these tracks. But the story doesn't stop here. There are still things that we as a society need to work on, because my generation's stories are just beginning.
We are speaking for freedom. And I say we got two sides believing that they're all alone, while most of the people just trying to get home. We got two sides believing that they're all alone, while most of the people just trying to get along. And I am telling what I know, and I am singing what I see. And I see that we got to do more than we've done before, 'cause we are speaking for freedom today. Yes, this is Independence Day. Yes, these are our Independence Days. In the multi-trans new local spaces, we are speaking for more than two sides. We got colorful faces, virtual spaces that mix between truth and lies. Yes, we mix between truth and I wonder how I could have been lost, couldn't find my way. Freedom comes from who we be, not what we say. Take your time, be okay. We are speaking